or the vast majority of men, I would argue, talking about feelings is not just something we haven't been trained to do, it's taboo. When I grew up, you could be sad, you could definitely be happy. Could you be angry? Like, it wasn't something that was frowned upon. You could be disgusted about food or something along those lines, but like that was it. There were like 4 emotions. There's a tool I use with almost all the men. Then it's the feelings wheel. Get it free online. I'm going to put it up as a resource for the book that just came out, so you can get it there too.
This episode is for anyone who suffers with addiction. And we're not talking about just drug or alcohol addiction. We're also talking about addictions like pornography, phone usage, overeating, overworking, exercise addiction. All the things that we don't really look at in society as problematic, but can spiral us into addictive behavior. In this episode, we have Dr. Adi Jaffe, the author of the new upcoming book, Unhooked. He's an addiction specialist and a nationally recognized expert on transformation and communication, especially in times of deep crisis. In this episode, you are going to learn the tangible, practical practices that you can do to begin to overcome addictions to things like pornography and your cell phone. If any of these behaviors are coming between you, your happiness, your partnership, intimacy, it's a problem. And in this episode, my only hope for you is that you feel empowered enough to know that you can make a change and better your life and better your relationships. And Dr. Adi is the man to do it. Enjoy this episode. Hi, brother. Thank you for coming to the show, man. I've been wanting to get you on, but this is perfect timing because you have your new book coming out, Unhooked. Unhooked. And we are going to talk all things what you call compulsive habits. You corrected me. I said addiction. You said, well, more broadly, compulsive habits.
Yeah.
And we're going to go into that because a lot of us viewing and listening, phone, food addiction, compulsive habits, porn, workaholics, everybody listening, viewing, we know somebody who's tapping into there. So first and foremost, welcome to the show.
Thank
you. Why do you use the word compulsive habits before you do just like addiction? Is addiction too narrow?
A, addiction's a little narrow. B, there's so many stereotypes of who meets addiction criteria that I think we go immediately to like the homeless, unemployed, disheveled, older man under a bridge when we think of addiction. Or maybe now in the last 10 to 15 years, we might have expanded that to the suburban kid popping pills, right? Like we have stereotypes in our heads about what that means to have an addiction. We also, and I talk about this quite in the book, we have a sense of what addiction means. It's a medical disorder, a disease, as they talk about it in many, many circles. And I think that pigeonholes the conversation because we don't think of somebody who gorges themselves on food as having an addiction. The symptoms are the same, right? So I'll talk about how I define it. A problematic behavior, it could involve the ingesting of substances or not, but a problematic behavior that interrupts your life in meaningful ways. You've struggled with it for a long time and you've had repeated attempts to stop or moderate it, but have been unsuccessful, and it's causing you damage in your everyday life. Anything that qualifies under that, as far as I'm concerned, is in the book.
And compulsive habits, the things that we go, okay, I'm good, cold turkey, and then all of a sudden, we're not cold turkey. We're back at it before we even know it.
Or you end up saying like, I'm only going to do one.
That's
and
right.
Then you do it 3 times.
That's right.
Yeah, that's another version.
So is in the brains of people who have these habits, is there a structural change to the brain? Is something happening? Are there neurotransmitters off? Are there receptors in their brain off? What is happening on the physiological level that you see with these people?
That's a great place to start. And I think I'll answer the question and then I'll explain why I think we've had too much focus on that and it's become oversimplified in a way. It's hard to say whether there are structural changes because of the use or whether people who have a proclivity to struggle with addictive habits have had those changes. There are certainly some shifts in brain chemistry, primarily, let's say, around dopamine and opioid receptors, that are connected with repeated habitual use. But the thing is, that's true for dopamine with any habit. So I'll just pull back a little bit, right? I'll use Pavlov's dog example. It was in my dissertation. I think it was in my first book. It's not in this one, but it's a good example. Everybody knows the experiment, but I'll remind us. Right? Pavlov takes a dog. Dog is given food, but every time as the food gets presented, there's a bell that rings. So it's like bell, food. Everybody knows that study. Eventually, do you remember in the study what happens when the bell rings? Like
The salivation.
They start salivating. Well, the idea there is this: a dog normally salivates when they see food or when they start eating, and that's to serve their glands, their processing of the food that they're getting. So it makes biological sense for you to salivate at food. It doesn't make a ton of sense for you to salivate at a bell. But what the idea is, the reason the dog starts salivating at the bell is the dog knows food is coming and it's preparing. That's true. Another thing is, initially at that experiment, the dog would have dopamine release when they got the food. Later in the experiment, the dog gets dopamine release at the bell. They don't get dopamine release at the food. Why is that important? We have a wrong way of thinking about dopamine. We think about dopamine as the reward or the pleasure neurotransmitter. That's not true. It's the pleasure detector or the reward detector. So the reason the dog initially got dopamine release at the food is it saw food, it was happy about the food. As it's going to eat it, it got some dopamine. If it didn't know that it was food, it got it when it first tasted it, because now taste buds are reacting and all the physiological, neurological, pharmacological processes in the brain are like, oh my God, this is good, let's have it. But that's because the brain just said, hey, pay attention, this is something new and good we need to know. Once the food was expected after the bell was the unexpected reward. The food was now expected, no more release of dopamine. Why is that important for addiction? Two things. Number one, any habit over time requires less and less dopamine to create it. So there are a lot of things we do in our everyday life that learning happened through dopamine release. I don't have evidence on what I'm talking about right now, but I'll make a conjecture here. Let's say like walking, when you learn how to walk. Little baby stumbling around, gets up on its feet. Everybody's like, oh my God, look at you. Creates dopamine release in the brain. The baby's like, oh my gosh, I did something great. It tries to keep going after that. You don't get dopamine release anytime when you get up anymore. It's expected. You know how to do it. So all habits gradually release more dopamine. But, and I literally did my dissertation on this, a lot of drugs release dopamine when they are consumed. So drugs overplay the learning piece in habits. So now let's think about what I write about in the book. That's drugs. Like cocaine releases extra dopamine. Meth releases extra dopamine. Nicotine releases extra dopamine. All through totally different mechanisms, but they all do it. But here's the thing. So does sugar. Right? So does porn. So does doing well at work and getting paid. So all these things can become compulsive. So does, by the way, checking your phone and getting a little beep. So that's why all these things can be addictive. We just keep focusing on drugs because they're the things that create the most obvious problems. The reason I focus on other things, I think porn use is at least as big a problem. Like men are getting into trouble in all the relationships in life, either because they're hiding the porn or because due to their porn use, they've disconnected intimately from their partner. So there are neurological changes, but they're neurological changes for all habits, and all rewarding habits, like the things I just mentioned, create this kind of like oversized adjustment to dopamine.
So chicken or the egg type situation. Maybe they had that. It could have been genetic or epigenetic or something that has, or maybe nature, nurture, even the household they grew up in, which I want to go into a little bit later. But yes, when you hear addiction, automatically you think about drug addiction, and alcohol addiction, and rehab centers. But we're not seeing everyday addictions for what they are, at least in the collective right now. We're not speaking about it the way that we are in, you said, as common as maybe drug use right now with something like porn. And I know we have a lot of female listeners, viewers and listeners. There's got to be someone out there who's had a partner who's not connecting intimately because of porn usage. Where's that break happen? Because I know you work in relationships. What happens when someone is overconsumed by pornography that it causes the rift in the intimacy that is so essential, lifeblood for the partnership?
I think that's a good starting place to go. And if you have a lot of female listeners, I'll go a little farther and I will make a prediction that over half of the women listening right now have had to deal with this. There's actually this impact now that we've seen in the last, I'll say 10 years, let's say maybe it's longer, but 10 years, I'm going to say, because the proliferation of digital porn has made it, I'm 48 years old. I'm old. So when I was an adolescent, getting porn was work. Like you had to go to a newsstand or something and steal porn.
Yeah.
Or you had to go like find a videotape.
Yeah.
If anybody doesn't know what videotapes are, please look them out on Wikipedia. Now I have porn in my pocket whenever I want it, and it's free. So the access has changed for sure, the prevalence and frequency. A lot of women I talk to talk about the expectations or the performative component of sex and porn, and how they're kind of expected to play that role in a relationship. Because, and I'll say this, I'm going to make a little light of it, but like, did you ever watch superhero movies when you were a kid growing up? You did, right? Like Avengers or Superman, whatever, right? Spider-Man. As you were watching those movies, was it a pretty young age at which you went like, okay, Spider-Man's cool and all, but that's not real. Like, there's nobody that can go like this and like fire spider webs out of them where they can swing off the Empire State Building. Right? Like you understood it. Maybe your mom told you, maybe your dad, somebody was like, hey, Superman that's like in a studio. That doesn't happen for real. Now, it's rare that kids actually try to jump off a building and be Superman. It happens every once in a while. We hear about it, but it's rare. We know those are stories. We know they're fairy tales. We know they're make-believe. Has anybody ever told you that with porn until a later age? No. A lot of people start watching this at 11, 12 years old. They've never had sex. They don't know what real sex is like, and they start believing porn is sex. So that's one piece. Your expectations about what intimate physical contact is supposed to be like gets really skewed. Not to say porn can never look like, real sex can't ever look like that, but it's certainly not a standard, number one. Number two, what I find in a lot of my clients, and there's a story about a guy in the book that deals with porn addiction. Real relationships take work. Like it or hate it, it takes work. You get into fights. You disagree on things. You have to figure out how to solve problems, bridge gaps, overcome early developmental changes. You grew up in one kind of family. I grew up in another. We yelled a lot. You're super quiet. When I yell, you think I'm angry at you. I'm just expressing myself, right? You gotta figure out how to work all that stuff out. It's hard. That's why a lot of relationships don't work out. With a lot of my clients, what ends up happening is when the relationship is struggling, porn's an answer. It's not, again, some people just drink instead of it. So instead of fighting with the wife, they have 3 drinks and now they don't really need to fight. They can chill, right? Some guys go to porn. In both situations, the learning internally is, I don't need to learn how to solve my relationship problems. I can shortcut a hack into not caring about them. Long term, that interrupts intimacy. You never actually, I think I learned the skills on how to have real feelings and conversations with my partner, who was my fiance and wife at it now, in my mid-30s. That's the first, and there was a lot of it was connected to stopping online porn use.
I love this point that you're saying, because it's sort of that coping mechanism where so much is so emotionally charged. You don't want to necessarily look at yourself and how you're contributing to this disagreement or the perpetuation of these relationship problems. And it's so easy to go into the drinking. It's so easy to go into the porn. But we don't look at the porn as detrimental as the drinking to the relationship and to the intimacy. So how common is this porn use like for people, like addictive wise or compulsory wise?
It is really hard to measure that question because, first of all, pornography use has not been not a recognized addiction. Sex addiction in general is not. But I'll tell you this, there's stats that say that around 30 to 40% of men hide their porn use from their partners. So I'll argue, and this is defensible, but it's not an empirical fact. I don't have real hard data to show what I'm about to say. I'll argue that for at least a portion of the people who hide it, there's a compulsive nature to it. And I will tell you that I talk to a lot of men who, at least at the outset, at least initially, use porn near daily and think nothing of it. And it always reminds me, I've been writing about addiction for like 14, 15 years. And I wrote an article for Psychology Today 12 years ago, 13 years ago. And it was around the fact that cannabis activates opioid receptors also, in addition to cannabinoid receptors. And so I call the article, "Can Marijuana Be Addictive? You Can Bet Your Heroin on That," because heroin also activates. It was like a little pun. And this guy got really angry with me in the comments because a lot of people think weed can't be addictive. And the thing he wrote was like, "I'm 70 some years old. I've smoked weed every day of my life since I was 14 or 15. And I've never met anybody who's addicted to weed." And I was like, "Have you had a mirror?
Right.
Like, have you ever looked in the mirror? Like, you've been smoking for 60 years, bro. Like, what would happen if you even tried to stop right now?"
Yeah.
And I didn't even have this conversation with him because it's comments online. But how many men use porn daily or near daily and never think anything of it? And it doesn't have to be compulsive because you do it every day. We do a lot of things every day that are not compulsive. But many of those men have literally never even thought that it harms them at all or their relationship. So they've never tried to stop. And a lot of men, when they try to stop, they find out it's really hard.
Wow. So they haven't made the connection. They're just like, this is part of being a guy. Like, it's just what I do. And it's what I've done since I was a teenager. And so for those folks, either partners of those folks or the men in general, what can we do as that first step of being like, okay, I think I'm using this too much. I think I'm looking at porn every single day and it just became a commonality. And I don't know if I'm addicted or not, but I don't know what would happen if I stop. What is like that first step of that awareness and moving forward with it? With the new year beginning, I've been thinking about truly leveling up my health game, especially when it comes to supplement quality. And there's one company that's really impressed me, that is Puori, their O3 Ultra Pure Fish Oil. And what makes it special is that they use small fish and test every single batch over 200 contaminants. There's something called a Clean Label Project. We're talking about the highest standards for purity, no heavy metals, no pesticides, none of them fishy burps that you get. And these omega-3s are at premium therapeutic levels. The EPA and DHA are at these levels that are going to support your brain, your eyes, your heart. Many supplements do not have enough EPA or DHA, and oftentimes fill up their capsules with other types of oil like sunflower oil. Puori is fully transparent. It's one of the most transparent companies I've ever came across, and I truly mean that. I got a lot of love for Puori. If you're ready to upgrade your supplement game, you get 20% off by visiting puori.com/DRG and use the code DRG at checkout. That is PUORI.com/DRG, and DRG is the code for 20% off. You know, I've been thinking about my evening routines lately, and what I notice is that I really had a lot of the practices down, you know, the resting my body, reading a book, but I wanted something to help complement my sleep. And that's when I discovered Cornbread Hemp's THC gummies. Now, a lot of you know about THC gummies, but a lot of THC gummies are not pure and clean and high quality. What I love about these gummies is that they're the real deal. America's only USDA organic THC gummies made with a perfect 1-to-1 ratio of THC and CBD, but the best part is you ain't gonna have no hangover. It's pure relaxation, drifting off to sleep. And really the thing that impressed me is that they're 100% legal, made with no synthetic ingredients, clean, organic goodness that is gonna help you find your calm. If you're ready to upgrade your relaxation game right now, Heal Thyself listeners, you can save 30% on your first order. Just head to cornbreadhemp.com/DRG and use the code DRG at checkout. That is cornbreadhemp.com/DRG.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll go back to how I define something that is addictive or compulsive. Is it creating issues in your relationship? Let's just start with the basic statement that if you're hiding this from your partner, you're at least afraid that it would create consequences. Otherwise, why are you not being honest about it, right? In general, I think when we hide things from other people, it's primarily because we're either afraid of the reaction like we think we're cool, but we're afraid of the reaction they would have, or we know we're not cool and then we don't want anybody else to know, right? Like that's really why we hide our behavior. So which one is it? And if you think it's fine, go talk to your partner about it and it's all good. And if you think it's not fine, then maybe you need to think a couple of times at least about why you're engaging regularly in a behavior that you know is problematic. Number one, everything I just mentioned right now though is part of intimacy, right? I've known my wife for 20 years, right? We've been married for like 15, 16 years. So a ton of stuff comes up regularly that we disagree on. If I find that I have to hide it, that tells me something about the quality of our relationship. So number one, just take a step back and think to yourself, am I hiding it? Am I hiding the frequency? Why am I hiding what I'm watching? Right? Some men have fantasies that they would never share with their partner, but they go to porn for it.
Yeah.
So all those things are, to me, they're part of the intimacy building component of a relationship. Like where you took me when you asked the question is the whole masculinity, femininity, polarity question. There's an element, we've talked about this before, but like I'll go to the David Data kind of like masculine pole, right? Part of it is about being able to hold the container. To me, when you're hiding aspects of yourself, when you're lying about things that you're doing, when you're being explicitly disconnected, like you're not showing up as your most authentic self, which is if you're actively hiding stuff, you're not showing up as your more authentic. It's like a crack in the container.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard to come to your partner and feel whole and like you're able to hold what they need when you have your own leaks.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would ask men to just sit back. And again, it's not an all or nothing thing. It's not like, well, can I never use porn again? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you use porn every once in a while because you're away, sexually frustrated, like you need whatever. If you're hiding it and you're regularly using it, and that means it's causing intimacy problems with your partner, might need to look at it.
That's a great first step of awareness is like, okay, how am I using this? What's my relationship with it? And the hiding, like what would happen if we brought that up and said, partner, I love you. Listen, I watch porn all the time. What's going to happen?
Yeah.
Right? Maybe your partner says, okay, I love you, but is it a problem? Like, this is how I feel about it. And you guys meet in the middle. But God, I can imagine it's like so heavy and a block for the intimacy, especially the sexual relationship.
Yeah.
The people that you've worked with, the things that you've read on, when it comes to the sexual relationship, if someone is addicted to porn, will that almost inevitably affect the sexual relationship? How deep, not only in intimacy and relationships and opening up and honesty, but we're talking about just I don't want to have sex in it. Like I've heard from friends, I watch porn, I don't want to have sex with my wife as much.
Yeah.
Is this because we're just depleting ourselves? Like what is going on where it's really causing a crack in that sexual relationship?
I probably have a really nuanced answer because I probably don't have a really clear answer for this, if I'm honest. First of all, I know from my relationship, I know from every relationship I've been in the past, oftentimes, pretty frequently in relationships, there's a gap in sexual desire anyway. That's another one of those things you have to figure out how to negotiate, right? You want this, like, this is, I come up with weird analogies in my head sometimes, but it's like, if you're a carnivore steak lover that's dating a vegan, you're gonna need to have some conversations, right? If you want sex every day and your partner's like, once a week is dope, like I'm good, there gonna need to be some conversations. And again, I'm very much a libertarian when it comes to this. What should people do? People should do what works for them in their situation. So if you're using porn once a week, twice a week, I shouldn't give a number. You're using porn openly in a way that just helps you deal with the fact that your sexual desires don't align with your partner's, that your partner's like, yeah, go do your thing so that we can go watch a movie because I'm not in the mood tonight. Totally different than if you're hiding it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
The issue, like I brought up before, is like, is it causing damage? So if one of these friends you're talking about watches porn and then their partner is like, hey, I'm in the mood tonight, and they go, yeah, I'm cool.
Right.
Because they watched porn earlier that night, and it happens regularly. If they feel bad about it, if their partner's feeling bad about it, if it's causing fractures in the relationship, and they've tried to stop before, and they were like, man, it seems like on Fridays, my girlfriend is into it, but then normally Thursday and Friday, I've already watched porn and got myself off. And that way I'm never really ready for her on Friday and I can't stop it. It seems like there's something we need to look at.
Big problem. Yeah. Okay. Now that draws good perspective because we can think about to what level it's affecting the relationship.
100%.
And I would say probably the latter is more common. I don't know how many people, and God bless if there are, having those real conversations saying, oh, well, let's meet in the middle. Like let's say the woman doesn't want to have sex as much, then great. Like go do your thing. Like you said.
How many people are having those conversations?
Yeah, I don't know. I would think the latter is more common where it's
you
just
take care of yourself.
You just take care of yourself, but then it's coming in the way of the sexual intimacy.
Christian, that's probably true.
Yeah.
And I see that as something that we need to address in society at large. By the way, not all men agree, right? And so I'm not necessarily of the opinion that you need to share everything with your partner. Sophie and I do call it radical transparency, though. And in radical transparency, the idea is you should share the things that your partner would want to know without them knowing that they need to ask you. So again, even to the point that you just brought up around porn, I need to know my partner, right? Like, and again, I'm very open talking about my own life, because I feel like sometimes people want to have actual examples when they talk about this stuff. Like, Sophie knows that I periodically watch porn. And if there's a moment in which it bothers her, she'll bring it up to me, because I'd rather know and not hide it. I never want to, I'm not 14 years old. You know, like, you're 14 years old, you live with your parents, you don't want to get caught or whatever. Like, I'm an adult male.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not looking to be in a situation where I could get caught doing something that I don't think is that big of a deal. Now, if I started watching it really, really regularly, all of a sudden, I would still want to be able to talk to her about it, because I would want to check myself. And there's actually a story in the book, not about porn, but about drinking, that kind of speaks to that point. I think openness with the people around you gives you accountability, gives you a way to assess more objectively, or at least from multiple vantage points, how you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah. And I love that you both have that radical transparency. Viewers and listeners, just lean in. Is that something that really aligns with you? Really, like being able to put it out there. And can you repeat that quote you said at the beginning, that telling your partner the things that they...
Yeah. So the way we talk about radical transparency is knowing that you're going to tell your partner the things that they would want to be informed about, the things they want to know, even without them having to ask.
Without them having to ask. Beautiful. Like, that's a great quote for us to at least have as our North Star, and being like, well, what does it look like?
Yeah.
You know, at least it gives us a foundation we could follow with that quote. Now, I want to shift the gears to the phones.
Sure.
And ironically, the porn is on the phone, or it's accessible.
Yeah.
You said it on your pocket, right? Like,
yeah.
This is a big one, and it's coming up more in conversations lately in this podcast than it was years ago. Are we, in your opinion, as a society, addicted or have compulsory habits that are unhealthy right now with our phone? We obsess over our food, our water, even what we put on our skin, but we completely overlook something we consume way more, and that's air. Think about it. We breathe in about 11,000 liters of air every single day, and most of us have no idea what's actually in it. That's where Jasper changes things. They're the first company I found that really, really gets how home air quality impacts everything from our sleep to our energy level. They take a really holistic approach to home. And we just had a podcast with the founder of Jasper speaking about how people's sleep scores are jumping from the 61s to 90s overnight just by optimizing the air quality. But think about it, you're not stressing your body with breathing in poor quality air, whether it's dust, dander, mold. And it's not just about filtering the air. It's a clean environment where your body's going to truly thrive. And what I love about Jasper is they look at the whole picture. The PM 2.5 particles that we can't see, the VOCs from cleaning products or materials in our home, and even the CO2 levels that can affect our focus. They're not here just selling air purifiers. They're actually revolutionizing how we think about the air that we breathe. And if you're ready to transform your home air and your health, go to jasper.co/DRG and use the code DRG for $300 off. That's a limited time. That is JASPR.co/DRG, and the code is DRG.
Oof. Absolutely. Like, I'll scream it for the mountaintop. Yes. And there's a big difference. Even, I talked about this right before we started recording, I think sugar is one of the earlier drugs in our society. And I'm talking like purified sugar. Because before, in nature, you had to pick fruit, you had to take something else. The sugar came with fiber, came with nutrients. Purified sugar is like, let's take the most empowering, rewarding element of this and then just put that in all the other foods that wouldn't normally have it to these quantities. It kind of threw our circuits off. But even with that, it's distilling a natural phenomenon, right? The sugar is not targeting you in different ways that it's targeting me or targeting anybody else. It's the same sugar. Technology is different. Technology adjusts to your habits with purposeful algorithms to get you to pick up your phone more. I mean, AI is going to blow this up in ways that we cannot even imagine. Remember Minority Report?
Yeah. Tom Cruise.
We're going there, bro. I think by the end of 27, for sure, it might be in 25. Like, where you're going to walk by a billboard in the mall and it'll call your name.
Call your name.
100%.
Yeah.
Of course. Why not? Like, proximity or iris, identification, like your device, it's going to know you're there. Why not have your name on the billboard? It's digital anyway. Just switch, while you're driving, bro. Imagine the billboard shift to you. Everybody sees a different ad. Everybody's trying to grab attention. And, if you listen to anybody online in terms of like self-growth and development, hopefully one piece that you've picked up over time is the most precious commodity you have is your time on this planet, your attention. And it's getting hijacked right now. So I think it behooves us to do everything we can, everything that's under our control, to minimize the draw that these devices get from us, because they're already going to take an outsized amount of attention. Mm-hmm. You're going to look at it for news. You're going to look at it for text. You're going to look at it for FaceTime. You're going to look at it for phone calls, for email. You're already going to do it whenever you need to do it. Anything outside of that, cut it off. Mm-hmm. Because we have precious hours that are awake. I got like 6 to 8 hours a day when I'm not doing work and I'm aware. I want to use as much of that for things that I control. And I don't know if you've ever had this effect. I think we all do this. Sophie's an influencer, so it's like I see it with her all the time. And now I see it with my kids too. Have you ever had this effect where you see somebody in front of you holding the phone doing something? Maybe you're eating dinner together, lunch, you're hanging out. Then like 5 minutes, 7 minutes, and you're like, hey, can you put that thing down? They're like, oh, so sorry, I got caught up for a minute. And you're like, that was not a minute. That was 7 minutes. But when your attention is hyper-focused on something, the world disappears.
It's true.
They think it was 30 seconds, 45, a minute and a half, and it was 5, 6, 7. How many hours a week are people losing? And the time passed. Like, you're never getting that time back. So yes, I think it's a resounding yes.
Wow. Okay. So we are at that level already. Maybe 5 years ago, it was like not fully there, but we're at that level where it's taking so much of our time. Look, I know I'm on the phone all the time doing all the things that I do,
sure,
like Sophie. And, I had to put like these guardrails around my times.
Good.
It literally shutting me out of my phone. And it's weird because I'm like, okay, well, what do I do now? Like, how can I stimulate something else, Yeah. And I'm like, I'm just trying to it's funny. My brain is looking for something to stimulate it. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes I'm like, because it shuts me out multiple times a day, but by 8 p.m., I'm done for the day. I can't even hack it in.
You got to tell me what app you use, because I need it.
Yeah, it's really good.
I need
they need to sponsor me at this time, because
honestly, me and my
like,
kids, we all need that ish.
They block it and it's a wrap. You can't override it. And, at night I'd be like, well, damn. So, but now I started like reading more because I'm trying to do things with my time that are just like, but better habits, healthier habits.
Bro, I got 3 kids and a wife. Like, I'm never really bored.
Yeah.
So if I'm staring at a device, especially a phone, I hate saying it because I do it a little bit too, but it's an escape.
Yeah. Because the phone is acclimating to our habits, is it affecting our brain differently than heroin, cocaine, and alcohol?
It's a good question. I haven't seen a lot of research on it. One of the things I can do at the time when my phone blocks me out at 8 is keep reading more research articles. They're coming out. I used to love that stuff and I just don't have time to do it now. I'll say it more like this. The old version, Bell, this, a pretty woman, a pretty man, whatever, like an outside stimulus was a gamble. When an advertiser put it out, when you walked on the street, there was a probability that would draw your attention. And then there was whatever the one minus that was the probability that it wouldn't, right? 2 people walking past the same car, one person for whatever reason turns their attention, looks at it, another person doesn't, right? I think what the digital equation now does is the machine learns what you pay attention to, and it just gives you more of that. So it gradually increases the probability that you're going to like what's on it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. The natural world, it can do that. Like, you've got a partner, like anybody who's partnered up. If you want to spend the night watching a show, like I know what Sophie likes. So if I'm done, like I don't want to work anymore and I want to spend the night sitting in bed watching an episode with my wife, I'm probably not proposing The Avengers.
Yeah.
And I'm probably not proposing Monday Night Football. I'm probably not even proposing like some technical show about business, because she's gonna be like, no, I'm not into it. So I pitch her what I want her to do. But I've known my wife for 20 years. My device knows me every minute. Like it's like, I don't know if it's doing it yet. It is if you're giving it permission, but like it can see what you're doing on your Netflix.
Wow.
Now imagine if like Netflix is talking to Meta, talking to Google, like if they're all talking together. I mean, everybody listening has had this experience, right? You're sitting in your home talking about like the new LeBron shoes, open up your
It's
phone
crazy.
and the frickin' shoes are on the phone. You're
It's
like, come,
crazy.
please.
It's crazy. It is absolutely, Naz, right? Our common
Of course.
friend. We were talking about this this scamming Jamaican fortune teller. Her name was Miss Cleo.
Oh,
You remember Miss
sure, of
Miss Cleo?
course.
Call me
Call
now.
Miss
Yeah,
Cleo.
call
Yeah,
Miss
of
Cleo.
course.
And what, like an hour later, she popped up on my Instagram. Like, what? A
Miss
video of Miss
Cleo?
Cleo? Yes.
Wow.
I haven't seen Miss Cleo since the 90s. And she popped up on my Instagram. This
Yeah,
was this week.
Bro, it's no joke.
That's crazy.
Crazy.
That is crazy to me.
And
So
it's not
like,
a coincidence.
yeah, that's
I
not
don't
a
care what they tell us.
coincidence.
It's not a
That's
coincidence.
not like quantum manifestation. That's like technical. I don't know what just happened.
That's
type stuff.
that's Bezos Zuckerberg.
Bezos Zuckerberg.
That's
I
what that
got Bezos and Zuckerberg at the
Yeah.
same time. So we have this and is it that we are hardwired to engage with the things that pull our attention the most, as far as like, if it's showing us race cars, we love race cars, we're going to get more of that. And is it the dopamine being released? Do we know that before we touch our phone, dopamine is being released? There's going to be a pleasure signal in here. It's our pleasure signal when we touch our phone. It's what's happening in the body. What's happening that it's overriding our sensibility to just be like, oh, well, I'm not going to do it right now. Let me go back to reading.
Yeah. So two different pieces. One, I want to talk about the external stimulus. And then, man, I had this thought as you were talking. I'll try to get it back in the middle of talking. But one is the external stimulus, right? Those pings, those buzzes, all those noises, they purposely made in order to draw your attention, right? That's pretty much the point. So that's the first inkling. Please turn those off, all of them. If you approve notifications, do it from like your partner, your parents. Cut everybody else off. You do not need to be at the beck and call of everybody in your life all the time, including that weird person that you met on vacation 14 weeks ago at some random event, and now they just decided, like, no, you do not need that. Turn all that off. If you want to have notifications, put them like at the beginning, right? You can do them with scheduled notification, whatever. Just eliminate that. The next piece you're talking about, though, is when the habits get so ingrained, you have the internal impetus. There's actually a really great book from an Israeli researcher called Hooked. So ironically, my book is called Unhooked. His book is called Hooked.
Oh, I know that book.
Nir Eyal.
Yeah, she was on my podcast. He was on my podcast.
There might have been two different people that wrote about this. He's an Israeli researcher. Well, I mean, he's an American, but Israeli born. I actually wrote it. I might actually still write him back and have him read this book and see what he thinks. The goal for many great apps, think Instagram, think TikTok, Meta in its heyday, right? For sure. Is how do we create signals that become so ingrained that you and I now have an internal signal to go reach the app. So they don't even have to ping us. The perfect example with Instagram is if you didn't share it on your story, did it really happen?
Mm.
So now, I mean, we live in LA, the epitome of what I'm about to talk about. You go to a restaurant, before anybody eats, they take a picture of the damn food. Oh, look at this dish from Zinc,
Mm-hmm.
Instagram has now trained us that if it's an important enough moment, it's got to be memorialized in your story. So other apps like that have now hijacked your need to, that's how you experience it. I saw a video, we all have been here for this experience. I saw a video of a show, I forgot the name of the concert. What is it? Everybody has their phone up.
Was it Kind Music? It was a DJ?
Maybe. Yeah.
DJ set?
Everybody's got their phones out.
Yeah.
Recording the thing they're in, and they're watching the screen. They're not watching the show.
It was insane.
Like,
it was insane. Thousands of lights, just people staring at their phone.
Like but you're at the thing. Like, why are you recording the thing that you're at? By the way, are you ever going to look at that video after tomorrow? Probably not. So you're robbing yourself of an experience. But that was because Instagram is smart. TikTok, they're smart. They've programmed people to do that opposite. So I'm going to go a long way. You didn't even ask this question yet, but I'm going to lead us to this here because there's a ton of psychological evidence for the next thing that I'm going to say, and I want everybody to tune into it really, really hard. From early development to later in life, one of the biggest predictors of success, goal achievement, getting what you want out of life, is the ability to delay immediate gratification and reward. Otherwise, you're a slave to the little pings and things that happen in your everyday life. The biggest example most of you have probably ever heard about was the marshmallow test, right? Everybody's heard of the marshmallow test. You've heard about this thing. It's a really, really cool study with ridiculous implications that are really scary. Super simple experiment. And a teacher and a kid, think 5-year-old, 4-year-old, 6-year-old kid, they're sitting at a table, and the teacher says, "Hey, I got to walk out for a couple of minutes. I'm going to leave this marshmallow here, and I'll make a deal with you. If when I come back in a couple of minutes, you still have the marshmallow here, I'll give you another marshmallow. If you eat it, you got that one marshmallow. Cool, we got it? Okay." Walks out, and then the kid's being observed the whole time. Go on YouTube and watch videos of these kids. Some kids can actually just sit there and be like, "All right, don't touch the marshmallow." Other kids, they're like smelling it, licking
a
it.
little lick. Yeah.
Licking just to get like a little flavor. They're like feeling the marshmallow, right? Like they're doing everything they can to connect to the marshmallow, just not eating it. And some kids just like,
right to it.
Give me the damn marshmallow.
Wow.
The kid's ability to delay gratification and not eat the marshmallow has been linked with GPA, graduation rate, income 20 years later in life.
Wow.
Now think of all the stuff we talked about earlier and why, literally the reason why I'm so adamant about these books and this work that I do with people. Your ability to be turned on at 7 p.m. before you go to bed, 9 p.m. before you go to bed, knowing you're not going to get some and not going to porn to itch that itch is not just about not going to porn. It's about not being a slave to the immediate needs that you have all the time and letting those control you. And so I think our phones are now the biggest next challenge because I'm scared of the moment where we get to like, everybody puts on the Apple Vision glasses and we're done. Like I will never see your real eyes again. I'll just see the projection from Apple.
The avatar.
Yeah. Like I'm freaking scared we're moving towards that, like in a few years.
Pretty fast too. Yeah. I mean, I was just talking to my partner yesterday and talking to her how like, when I liked the song on the radio, I would put a tape and press play and record to record the song onto the mixtape, like pirate it off the radio. Now, technology, I mean, I don't think our brains have caught up to what has happened in the past 25, 30 years.
Sure.
It's incredible. And where we're at is just really also scary. For people who have that, like you said, proclivity towards, you know, really eating the marshmallow first or going to the porn first or you know, like going to whatever addictive their phone relationship.
Yeah. Chocolate.
The chocolate, like we were talking about eating.
Yeah.
Is there something connected to how they grew up? Is there something connected to any sort of nervous system dysregulation, traumas that they may have gone through that actually are creating compensatory expressions that we call addiction?
Sure. I mean, I talk about this a good bit in the book, and I would say this. You go that far back, the answer is yes for a subset of people, certainly. Whether that subset is 30% or 60% is really hard for me to say right now. We know there's trauma in about 60% of people who struggle with addiction, for instance, right? So whether that's why they struggle with it or not, I don't know, but that's a rough number for trauma. Even beyond compensatory mechanisms, though, part of it is literally just learning about how people behave. I give an example in the book, right? We get scripts, some implicit and some explicit, about how to behave when you were young, right? Like if you ever lived in a house where the moment you walked out of the house, if you're in a bad mood, your mom was like, "Hey, put a smile on. You know, we don't frown outside. Just show stiff upper lip, whatever." That was an explicit script. When we leave the house, we put on a smile and we pretend everything is okay. So a lot of people have a hard time showing their emotions in public or whatever. That's just one little example I give in the book, right? But one other example in the book is, let's say your dad worked really, really hard. I don't forgive the gender in these examples. It could be anybody. Your dad worked really, really hard, comes home from work every day when you're a little kid, opens up a six-pack, sits by the TV and watches a game or does something else. He may be stressed. There may be problems in the marriage. There may be money issues. His dad might have beaten him. Like there could be 500 reasons why your dad is doing that right now. You're a kid. You don't see the reasons.
Yeah.
You see the behavior.
Yeah.
So you learn when dad comes home, he grabs a beer and sits by himself and watches TV. I'm just giving that as a specific example because it drives a point home. Whether the kid likes that, likes the way their dad behaves, thinks he should be different, feels neglected, like all that stuff matters, but it doesn't matter as much as the fact that now you've learned to model. If you're the man, if you grow up to be a father yourself, you've now grown up with a model of this is how a dad behaves when he gets home from work. And that's something you have to outgrow. You have to push through it. Like some people talk about reparenting or whatever, but you have to relearn the behavior. You have to shift it. So I think certainly if we're willing to broaden the compensatory piece of what you said to that level, then I think, yes, that's a very big part of the struggle is we learn how to behave from our past experiences. Those past experiences were not necessarily ideal and they were not necessarily a perfect fit for us. And now we have to understand that and we have to kind of learn to come to terms with it. And then we have to learn how to change it, which a lot of people are not ready for.
You're saying that we develop with the stories that are modeled by oftentimes our parents, and those stories of what we modeled ourselves by or understanding can drive that risk that we really go deep into these habits or addictions.
Yeah, because those habits that you saw and you picked up as a child can cause discomfort. And a lot of us haven't been trained in what to do with this discomfort. So the coping is there to deal with the discomfort.
Gotcha.
The coping is not really about drinking. Like the point, sorry, maybe this wasn't clear enough. The point I was making is your dad was drinking for a 6-pack when he sat in front of the TV for a reason. You just don't know the reason. You learn the behavior. So later on in life, you didn't learn how to deal. Like your dad didn't come to you and say, hey, I'm going through a lot of struggle. Like you didn't get to understand the context. You just learn the behavior. So later when you're stressed out and you're all weirded out, you're like, well, this is what dads do. Dads drink. So you start drinking to deal with the pain. There's nothing else modeled. Somebody now has to teach you. You got to go talk to a therapist or go work it out. Or, your dad didn't go for a run and when he was stressed, he did this. So now, like, does that make sense? You lean on the habits you know.
Yeah, you lean on that. And it's, I think we undermine how deeply branded and imprinted these models are. Like many times, like I'll still see things that don't serve me that I learned in the past that come up and I'm like, what, how is this coming up now?
100%.
We oftentimes, like for better or for worse, take on a lot of those qualities of our parents that may have not served them or their family. But how many times you hear, oh my God, I'm becoming my dad right now. I'm becoming my mom.
Have you ever heard of Bruce Lipton?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had Bruce on my podcast when we had it a few years ago, a couple of times actually. And, Bruce talks about, to his mind, it's 95% of our behavior is unconscious, is up below surface. And he talks specifically about how we engage in these behaviors that were learned a long time ago. And we're not aware that we're performing them because they operate below the level of consciousness. And I think a big part of healing is coming to terms with the fact that those realities exist. We have behaviors that we are not explicitly in quote unquote control of, but they can be surfaced and then you can do something about them. One of the ways they get surfaced, as we talked about earlier, it's why I believe so deeply in this radical transparency piece, is accountability is actually one of the tools you can use. Right? Like, because I may not see myself objectively, but if I trust you, for instance, and you and we just had a conversation recently at a party, right? But accountability to me is like, I want to show up in the way that I believe I'm showing up for other people. So if I do something stupid or I do something that's inappropriate, I want to be around people who can be like, yo, what the hell are you doing? Versus somebody who's going to back off and be like, yo, he acts weird. Let me just back off and let me go somewhere else. And who do I want to do that more than my partner and my family? Does that make sense? So that's where accountability really comes in. And then you have to learn to trust the people in your life, that they have your best interest at heart. And they're coming to tell you this stuff, not because they want to be mean to you, not because they're trying to control you. They're trying to show you something that you may not be aware of. And that's a good thing. We should want more of that in our lives, I believe.
Yeah, which leads me to something that I know you work with is a lot of in relationships. And if someone is going to hold us most accountable, or at the very least show us that which is like coming up, it's oftentimes in partnership. And I know that you and Sophie do a lot of couples retreats. you see a lot of these couples coming in, talking, sharing about their relationship. What's the most common thing in the relationship right now that is causing that distance between couples?
Trust.
Trust. Okay.
Trust.
Betray of trust or internal stories of I don't trust men or I don't trust women.
Both. It's hard. I mean, sometimes it's explicit betrayal within the relationship. Again, I don't hide from this stuff. We had, when Sophie and I first were dating, I ended up cheating on her. And so that took years to rebuild out of. So sometimes it's an explicit breach of trust in that relationship. Other times it's previous breaches that have now made it harder for you to trust people, period. It could be stories from your childhood where your parents, your culture instilled specific ways of looking at a partner, looking at a potential source of these kinds of intimate, deep relationships that now creates a story, a background story for you that you have to overcome. And it doesn't matter which it is. It probably does. And if I sat here for 5 minutes and really thought about it, I could probably figure out a more nuanced way of saying this. But I mean, a lot of people, by the way, sometimes trust in yourself, right? Because if you've had repeated breakups and you haven't been able to hold on to even the relationships you really care about, people start mistrusting that they have what it takes to be able to hold a relationship. Mm-hmm. And so now you bring another person. Relationships are great. And it's the bringing together of two completely different human beings who are trying to share space, share money, share values, share goals. It's tough.
And then children, when they come up, and so the trust thing, like that is the thing, foundation. So how do we build better trust with our partner? Is this I know you're really big on communication and clear communication. Is that one of the biggest keys towards building a healthy relationship that is foundational on trust, even if there was something that happened?
Communication is key. Staying with the conflict instead of running away from it is another big piece, right? A lot of people, me included, by the way, are avoidant. And so when things get rough, we go to work, we go to a book, we go to do a workout, right? We don't want to deal with it. So staying with it is another one.
How do we stay with it? How do we stay with it?
Let me just give the third one that just is popping right into my head, and then I'll go back to that. And then the other piece, and this is something I tell a lot of my clients, especially when there's been a specific breach of trust in the relationship. Be honest when it's bad. Don't only be honest when it's good. A lot of people, when there's been a breach, let's not make it a sexual breach, a money breach. You spent $10,000 out of the bank account, but you didn't tell your partner about it. Now they found out and they're pissed because you're telling them we can't go to dinner, blah, blah, blah. But now you spent 10 grand, right? That's a breach of trust. A lot of people move from that conflict to, hey, let me just show you how great everything is. And they only share the good, but they don't share the pain. They don't share the struggle. In that situation, it could be, man, I was really tempted to buy something else for $3 grand yesterday. Or I owe this bookie like $2,000. How do I but they hide all the negativity because they try to put on this brave face and try to create this persona, this mask of how they're really behaving. I think women are probably better at the next thing I'm about to say, but men are not that stupid. When somebody's dishonest with you, you have a feeling. There's like this sense you have that you're just not getting the whole picture. And so it feels bad. It's just, you feel in your stomach, or your level of comfort and openness with the person kind of shuts down a little bit. You know it. You don't know exactly what's causing it. I think you rebuild trust by sharing the uncomfortable things with your partner, because that tells your partner the following. It says, man, I may not like everything that my partner thinks, but they're not perfect. We're not perfect. We're not the same person. But I can trust that if there's something I need to know, they're going to tell me. So that's where I think that one comes in.
In the communication, like, is there a way that for people viewing and listening, they go, look, I want my partner to communicate better with me. Let's take the example of the women listening, but their husband or their boyfriend, they don't even know their feelings. They don't even know what they're feeling. They don't even know how to communicate. Like, what is that first step to even create the spaciousness to have those conversations where the guy goes, well, I think I'm feeling this right now.
It's funny. I love that you went there. You went right to the feelings. There's a tool I use with almost all the men that are the male part in the coupleships that we work with, and it's the feelings wheel. Get it free online. I'm going to put it up as a resource for the book that just came out, so you can get it there too. You're 100% right, man. As a lot of us men, I'm sure this is also true for a substantial portion of women. I'm not eliminating that, but for the vast majority of men, I would argue, talking about feelings is not just something we haven't been trained to do. It's taboo. So you're not supposed to do it. The way I explained, like when I grew up, you could be sad. Nobody would really do anything or try to help you about it, but they could recognize you were sad. You could definitely be happy. Could you be angry? Like it wasn't something that was frowned upon necessarily in my house, but we didn't show a lot of anger. You could be disgusted about food or something along those lines, but like that was it. There were like 4 emotions. And so when my girlfriend at the time, whatever, would ask me like, "Hey, what's going on?" I'd be like, "Everything's cool." It shuts down the conversation because the way I like to talk about it, it's like I was painting my world in 3 colors or 4 colors, right? I had black, I had white, I had yellow, I had blue. So every painting just had 4 colors in it. So it was a bad day and maybe stressful, or it was a good day, it was meh. Right? Those are kind of like the volumes I had. You open up something like the feelings wheel, like I said, man, I felt really celebrated today at work, or I felt really really recognized. I felt valued, or I felt undermined. I felt disgruntled. I felt surprised. I was taken aback. Like we all know the words I just said, but how many men have ever used those in a sentence to describe their internal state? And it opens up oh, you felt surprised. What was surprising about? Well, Jimmy did this. I always thought he would be this kind of guy, right? Like all of a sudden you're having a conversation and the conversation is full. I've noticed to this day, by the way, 15, 16 years into this work, when I'm stressed out, those things shut down first, man. Like I don't want to talk. I don't want to go look at the feelings. But that's exactly one of those moments where I do have to sit back and go, hold on. Well, it actually just happened to me last night with Sophie, and I was trying to explain about work, and I could just tell her eyes glazed over. Now there are the fires in LA right now. It's insane. Our friends we're safe, but like our friends are losing everything. We had that random. You got that random alert yesterday?
Yeah.
She's like,
random alert. I was like, oh, we guess we got to go now.
Yeah. So I was on a plane back from San Francisco when that happened. She's texting me. She's like, babe, we have to evacuate. I'm like, what the hell? Wait, what? And then 7 minutes later, she's like, "Oh, it was a false alarm." I'm like,
They
all
literally
right.
text you back and said, "My bad. Don't disregard that one.
Totally.
You're good."
Sorry, bro.
Yeah.
So she had to deal with that on the ground. Long story short, old version of me, eyes glazed over. Right. I brought it up a little bit. She was like, "I can't deal with it anymore." Went to the room. Went back later. We were talking, and I said, I just want to let you know. And I expressed feelings. I was like, I understand you're dealing with a lot. I'm trying to share my day. I was just gone. I left the house at 6 a.m. I'm coming back at 6 p.m. I just wanted to share some wins and some things. And she explained where she was coming from. And we kind of had to hash it out a little bit. And we came to an agreement that at least for right now, we have to go back to the place where if I got to share something with you, I need to start it with what's called a gentle startup by the Gottmans. Hey, there's something I want to share with you. It's good, but there's something I want to share with you. Are you in a place right now where you can hear? Let me respect my partner enough to give them the space to say, give me like 30 minutes. I need to chill. So it's just, there's tools, but did you ever learn about the gentle startup from your parents?
No, we don't know. There's nothing gentle about that startup that I learned,
No. It would be like with my parents, they either just didn't talk about feelings at all, or my dad would be like, why are you freaking out? That would be the gentle startup, like somebody yelling at somebody else. So if you don't know the thing, you can't do it.
Yeah.
By the way, I want the next book. Sophie and I are probably going to do a version of this, but for relationships, essentially how to unhook or how to break away from bad relationship habits.
I'm excited for that book because there's a lot of people in relationships that are like, we need some guidance, some direction on this. But the feelings wheel is just a wheel that you can look at with names of emotions and feelings.
Yeah. So thank you. Good thing you're interviewing. It's my ADHD. The exercise I give, especially the men, but like I said, the couples in the relationships that I see oftentimes, is print the feelings wheel out. And for a while, whenever you're about to have a real conversation or you need to talk to your partner, take out the wheel and start the conversation by identifying 1 to 3 at most words. Sometimes you feel more than 2 feelings and they're opposite. Identify the words and say, hey, I'd love to talk to you. I'm feeling this, and this right now. Like I'm feeling rejected, hopeful, and tired. Right. And like what I've found is the conversation can flow much, much more easily for 2 reasons. Most of us make the mistake when we start a conversation with somebody, we started with you. Stop. We all get defensive when somebody starts a conversation with us with you. Hey, Christian, every time you You're like, oh, what, I got to protect myself. Arms are going up. Let me figure out where the punch is coming from. So why it happens to us every time? Why do we do it to other people? Stop starting conversations with you. Say, hey, I am going through something right now. I'm feeling this, that, and the other thing. Do you have a little time to talk? Now, if your partner's in a place where they can receive energy and support you, then they're all in, right? You're not making them defend themselves. So the feelings wheel makes people focus on the I and the feelings first. You identify those. Hey, I'm feeling a little taken aback. I'm feeling a little surprised and rejected. Do you have a little time to talk? And now it's like, okay, let's open up a conversation.
Yeah. And for the people, oftentimes the men who are only working with certain paint colors, like you said, now this gives a lot more variety into like leaning into like, well, I'm disgruntled, like I feel disgruntled,
Now you got to figure out why.
And now you got to figure out why. And then a great opening is, or follow-up is like, well, like you said, well, what made you at work feel disgruntled?
Yeah.
Right. So I can see how the conversation versus like, how do you feel today, honey? And like, oh, I'm just tired.
A big feeling that I think a lot of us deal with more often than we express is overwhelmed. And so we become overwhelmed, which causes us to shut down. But if we were able to express the overwhelm, there could possibly be some support. And so yeah, it's little. That seems to me like a pretty small tactical tool.
Yeah,
but it can have massive impact.
I love that. This is what I love: the practical interventions.
Sure. Yeah.
So in your book, what types of habits are you covering, or is it just overall? Like, what can we expect when we grab it?
So the examples in terms of specific addictions are, I have a technology, work, porn. Actually, technology and porn are one and the same, but technology, work, porn, heavy drugs, cannabis, alcohol. I think there's one about food. And I think those are the stories of people that I share. But since the whole reason of the book being called Unhooked is because those aren't the real problems. The real problems are the underlying issues. There's dealing with a single parent household. There's social anxiety. There's severe early life trauma. There's habit learning from just a sibling and just kind of now being saddled with what your older brother taught you how to do, kind of thing. And like, you're just not positioned to have any say in the matter in a way. There's kind of lost dreams and missing your turn at the exit of life and being really upset at that and starting to use drugs and alcohol to cope. There's rebellion, like teenage rebellion. So there's a lot of examples, because the point that I make is you got to get to that. Like, I need to understand what role did the substance, did the behavior serve for you?
Yes.
How did it help you when it started? Because it was never harmful when it started. If it would have been harmful when it started, you would have stopped it. It helped. And normally it helped for like 20 years. The average length of time from the time somebody starts struggling, not doing the thing, but struggling with it, to getting help is 15 years.
15 years it's been brewing already.
Yeah.
And
15 years.
And then things start falling apart.
Yeah.
Or have been falling apart, but it's really on the surface now.
Yeah.
15 years. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that you're not just covering the addictions and bringing light to that, but you're really bringing light to, okay, well, what are the drivers of the addictions that the addiction had helped us with? Like you said, if the addiction was giving us nausea and we were throwing up every time we did it, we probably wouldn't have done it. There has to be a pleasure element that it was helping us cope or numb.
There's actually, you talking about biology, so I'll give you a very clear example of how that's true. There's a group of people with a gene called the ALDH22 gene. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, primarily in Asian populations, but that subset of individuals, is only like 6 to 7% of them in the population, cannot process the first product, the byproduct of alcohol being digested, processed in the liver. Alcohol breaks down into aldehyde. They can't break down aldehyde from alcohol. They get flush, they get nauseous, they have a lot of negative physiological reactions, because aldehyde's like formaldehyde, right? It's a poison. So when they try to drink a thimbleful or 2 thimblefuls of alcohol, and they're like flush, sweaty, and nauseous, guess what? Almost none of them develop an alcohol problem. Because they hate drinking. That doesn't mean they can't get addicted to weed or cocaine, though, by the way, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I want to make sure people don't put too much emphasis on the biology. The biology is there for the drug response. That's great. but it doesn't deal with the underlying issues.
Right, which is a lot of the things that you had mentioned, and you've met, and we can look forward to reading about in the book.
Yeah.
Amazing. The next time we talk, I want to do a whole thing on alcohol.
Sure.
Because this is a whole podcast, and I want to talk about the psychology of it, especially now, and like
in general, yeah.
It's crazy. I put up an alcohol post and how it's connected to cancer, and the comments, people came with every other excuse of what causes cancer except alcohol. And I couldn't believe. They're like, oh, well, it's the pesticides in the alcohol. I'm like, okay, maybe, but can we just look at the alcohol? No, I don't want to look at the alcohol. So I really want to talk to you about your perspective on that.
Sure.
But we'll do that as a whole podcast next time, man. Yeah. Congratulations on the book. What's the name of the book?
The book is called Unhooked: How to Free Yourself from Addiction Forever.
Okay, amazing. And where can we get it?
It's available everywhere. Sophie and I are doing this little thing. When we stop by bookstores that have it, we're walking in, we're signing copies. So we, just so people can have a little surprise when they pick it up. But Barnes and Nobles, a bunch of independent bookstores.
Cool.
And of course, the Goliath, the giant of them all, Amazon.
You can get it on Amazon.
Yeah. And I appreciate the opportunity to come talk about this stuff. I think a point I make in the book is pretty much everybody I know is either somebody who's struggling with these or somebody who knows somebody and is close to somebody who's struggling with these. Mm-hmm. There's really nobody I've ever met that has never been impacted by addictive tendencies at all. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I really want everybody to understand when they read this book is you can't say something is abnormal when half of the population struggles with it.
Yeah.
Compulsive addictive habits are a normal part of our society. That doesn't mean we don't need to figure out what to do about them and help people.
True. Absolutely, man. And your website, where do we find you or any?
So adijaffe.com is my main website. There's actually a website called Read Unhooked that just kind of talks about the book. And on the website, once you buy the book, if you submit your little receipt or whatever, you'll get additional resources from the website that are free for you.
Amazing. So viewers, listeners, if anyone you know has a compulsory habit, or if they want to call it addiction, but know that there's a resource out there from an expert who's been at it for 15, 16 years, you said?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I used to struggle with my own addiction. We didn't even talk about that. But in 2010 is when I got my PhD. So I guess 15 years now.
15 years, man. And for the alcohol, we're going to go into your story too. I want to do that. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
thank you for, and by the way, there's some beautiful diagrams in here that make reading this really easy, good flow explanation. It can absorb. It's not just like it's academic top to bottom. We got the good stuff in there.
Yeah, a lot of diagrams to make things easier to understand. And I kind of wrote it like a choose your own adventure, which you didn't talk about, but it's meant as a manual. Like you start, the first couple of chapters set the scene, and then after that, you can really pick the parts you want to read that'll help you right now.
Amazing stuff, man. Thank you for coming on the show and blessing us with this wisdom. We feel empowered. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Dr. G.